Gandang umaga sa inyong lahat. Good morning. So, pang-apat na araw. Okay, Associate Professor Jerico de Villa from the Philosophy Department, broadcasting from our office. Pang-apat na araw, 290,000 cases na tayo meron ng COVID-19 simula sa iisa lang. Ngayon, 290,000. Grabe, no? Okay, we're waiting for the others. Yan, biglang dumami. Yan. Sipin nyo, January 1, hindi pala, mali. Correction. January 30. January 30, isa lang ang kaso natin. Galing sa Wuhan, China. From isang kaso ng COVID-19, meron na tayong 290,000. So by the end of this week, 300,000 na tayo. Sabi ng presidente noong February 3, nothing to be worried about. Alright? This COVID thing. 1 or 2 or 3 lamang per country. Nothing to be worried about. Some sense of reality. Alright, so balik tayo sa usapan natin. Yan, kompleto tayo. Present na. Hindi. Kulang pa ng 6. Oh my God. 6. Oh, meanwhile, everybody, okay, share lang ako ha. Share tayo ng screen. Alright, everybody, attendance tayo. So, nasa na ba yung attendance natin? Attendance. Yeah, attendance. Alright, we'll post it. There you go. Attendance for today. Pang-apat na araw na lecture natin. Torture ba sa inyo, ha? Torture pag ako nagde-lecture. Sorry, wala kayong choice. Kaya ako nagturo para meron akong captive audience. Alright. So, attendance, ha? Never again na tayo ay mawawalan ng mga leader na aalalay sa bayan. Alright? At kayo, practice maging leader. Kung kayo practice ng practice, pagdating ng araw ng mga challenges, madali lang to take the challenges. Pero pag hindi kayo, pag kulang sa practice, mahirap. Alright, ito practice yan, practice. Alright, there you go. Mentimeter. Yan, mentimeter tayo. Alright, nasa na ba yun? Mentimeter. Dapat may mentimeter tayo ngayon eh. Ba't nawala? Oh my God. Nasaan yun? Yan. Ito. Alright. Tungkol saan ang mentimeter discussion natin ngayon? Everybody? Alright. Nakita nyo kung ano yung mentimeter discussion natin ngayon? This is your DJ talking about love. Wala lang tugtog eh. Gusto nyo may tugtog. Mamaya patugtugin ko yung paborito ko, Big Bang. Alright, so ano yung ating mentimeter ngayon? Ito. Yan ha. Login ha, login. Alright. Tingnan natin, nag-login na ba kayo? Alright, nag-login na ba kayo? Yan ang first question natin. Is love real? Alright, This is the code. Alright, login kayo. Nandyan yung link. That's the code. Yes! Oh! Sigurado ka ba dyan? Ito yung ating code. Hintay tayo. Marami kayo ngayon eh. Oh, yes! Oh, yes! Ha? Niwala ako sa inyo. Aba! Lahat kayo, ha? Wala tayong, oh, no. Yan! Yes and no. Talaga naman, no? Hindi mo kasi, parang parang sasagutin kayo, pero hindi kayo sagutin. Yes and no. Yes and no. No! Oh, meron na naman tayong outlier. Wow, tigas ng ulo, no? Bakit hindi ka sinagot? Or sinagot ka tapos ikaw ay nasa isang tabi at meron pa palang iba? Ano kaya? Alam niyo ba pakiramdam pagka sinagot ka tapos yung pala merong iba? Oh my God! Well, pakinggan niyo yung mga tugtog ni Taylor Swift. Yan, makikita niyo dyan. Gusto niyo ba si Taylor Swift? Dati idol ko yan eh. Kaya lang, hindi ko na gusto ngayon eh. Kasi dami pala niyang boyfriends. Woo! Alright, so far, 6 say yes, 7 say yes and no, and 1 says no. Hindi pala. No answer. Walang nagsabi ng no. No answer, meron. No answer, well, outlier ka pa rin. Secret, Okay, next question. One does not have any linguistic expression for love. Kunyari lang, suppose. Presuppose niya, wala siyang linguistic expression for love. Is it possible for him to know what love is? What do you think? You have no word for love. Not a word. Can you say love exists? Yes. Oh, yes. No. Oh, may isang outlier na naman. No. Exciting talaga tong klase na to. Pagdating ng bago mag-first exam, sigurado nagdidebate na tayo. Yes and no pa rin, ha? So, biglang nawala yun ng answer. Okay. So, 18 say yes, 19 pa. 1 says no, and 3 say yes and no. Biglang nawala yung no answer. Akala ko ba wala kang alam about love? Bakit ngayon may sagot ka na? Baka nasa yes and no ka na, no? Kasi kanina. Alright, third question. One absolutely does not have any physical way of expressing love as with songs. Kasi, remember kanina, ang tanong natin, walang linguistic expression. Pero kahit walang linguistic expression, meron naman expression in painting. Meron expression well, hindi pala songs, music. May expression in music. May expression in painting. May expression in sculpture. Alright? So, paano kung wala kahit anong physical way of expressing love as with songs? Walang kanta, walang tula, walang terms, walang sculpture. Still possible for him to know love. Okay, siyam kayo, Siyam. 9 are saying, without physical way of expressing love, you can still know what love is. Oh. 13, nabawasan kanina. Kanina ilang ba? 20 something Tingnan nga natin. Kanina. Excuse me. Pinakang marami natin, 19, Ayan, nabawasan. 15 na lang. 16. Alright. Balik tayo sa discussions natin. Ito yung tanong, ano? Eh, kung walang physical, 16 sabi nyo, may physical expression. Sorry, kahit walang physical expression, you will know about love. If you know about love, maybe you can tell us. Sige nga, can anybody tell us? Comments. Wala ba kayong comments dito? Sa Facebook? Sorry, sa YouTube. Comments, wala? Wala so far? Okay. How do you tell yourself you know love? How do you tell everybody else, someone or yourself you know love, if there is no physical way of saying so? Oh, may tanong ako dyan, ha? Sa chat natin, YouTube. Alright? Yan ang tanong ko. May sagot ba kayo? Can you see that? Yan ang tanong ko. May sagot ba kayo? So far, wala. Sige nga. Sige, tuloy natin yung usapan. Tingin tayo sa Mentimeter. Sorry, sa klase. Wala bang comments dito? Comments? Wala. Okay, walang sumasagot. Sige. But I presume you know what I'm talking about. Can everybody hear me or see me? Some reaction please so I can go on with the lecture. Tingnan na natin. Dito, comments dito. Okay, check ko yung comment nyo, ha. Comment kayo dyan. Saka dito sa... Yan, yes, you can hear me. Yes, sir. Bakit walang sumasagot? Bakit walang sumasagot? Hindi nyo kaya sagutin. Sige, mamaya na natin ituloy, ha. Alright, what's our topic for today? Alright, I gave it to you. Language, ayan. No? Can you see that? Language. Technical definition of language. Alright? Commonsensically, when you define language, ito yung dating, tingnan nyo. Alright? Let me just make sure. Alright? Ito yung pangkaraniwang definition ng language. It is the method of human communication and focus here, either spoken or written. Alright, the method of human communication, either spoken or written, consisting of the use of words in a structured and conventional way. Galing yan sa Oxford, ha? Oxford Dictionary yan. Alright? Oxford Dictionary yan, hindi ordinary yan. It is a system of communication, well, at least dito sinabi a system, ano? A system of communication used by a particular country or community. Yan. Ito, mga ito, tawagin nating commonsensical definition of language. Commonsensical. Bakit? Halimbawa din spoken or written lang ang sinasabi. Sa totoo lang, alright, merong mga languages na iba yung form of communication. Alright, when you say spoken, you can hear it. When you say written, you can see it. Yes? Papaano kung bulag ka? Wala kang mata, or may mata ka, kaya lang bulag. Alright? So kung bulag ka, paano na yan? Diba? Wala kang language, hindi naman totoo yan. Meron kang language, kaya lang yung language mo, ay not by way of seeing, not by way of hearing, but by way of feel, di ba? Anong tawag doon? Braille. Do you remember that? Braille? Alright? Braille. Yan. Love is something that is felt. It can be expressed even if not said or shown directly. Mr. Andal, if you show, whether directly or indirectly, then there is some physical way of showing. If you can feel it, Mr. Andal, if you can feel love, that means there is some physical way of feeling, like, with your senses, like with your nerve endings. Mahirap makiramdam na walang nerve endings, Mr. Andal. Alright, balik tayo dito. Language, technical definition. Alright, technical definition. That's our focus of attention. Alright, Mr. Andal, punta tayo din eh. For our technical definition of language, we are going to use the one given us by William P. Alston. Si William P. Alston is a first-rate philosopher, although kamamatay lang niya, matanda na kasi, 90 plus. Kung hindi ako nagkakamali. Si William P. Alston used to be a professor sa Michigan University, Michigan State University, and then some other Ivy League University in the United States. Ito yung kanyang definition galing sa Collier's Encyclopedia. Alright? Language is a system of units realizable in some sensory medium, only certain combinations of which have meaning by convention and hence useful for communication. Yan ang ating technical language, and that's what we will discuss for the entire hour and a half. Bakit buong hour and a half? Mahaba yung kwento eh. Technical masyado yung definition eh. Alright. Unang-una, language is a system. Alright? Ano ibig sabihin yan? Language is a system. Well, what does that mean? Alright? Gawa tayo ng another board. Alright? When you say you have a system, excuse me, medyo sinisipon ako sa lamig ng aking kwarto. When you have a system, alright, that means you have units in your system. Alright? Whatever these units are, they belong to a particular range or domain. Alright? Pag sinabi nyo may system, una, merong domain. Alright? Tapos, ano ibig sabihin yan? Di pagka may domain, ibig sabihin may boundary around the domain. Yan. And then within the boundary, there are things in it. Alright? Question. Ano ang pagkakaiba? Alright? Punta tayo din sa ating YouTube. Yan. Can you see me? Alright? Question. Dito. Alright? What is the difference between simply a bunch of numbers and a system of numbers? Yan. Yan ang tanong natin. May sasagot ba dyan? Siguro naman, may sasagot dyan. Yan ang tanong natin. What is the difference between a bunch of numbers and a system of numbers? Sorry wala pa akong prize ngayon eh. Pero later on, may prize tayo. Later on, magbibigay tayo ng prize sa mga question. Pagka mahirap na yung mga tanong, pagka logic na pinag-uusapan natin, mathematics and logic. Alright, walang sumasagot, kaya ako na lang muna. Well, remember, sabi ni Pythagoras, may harmony, di ba? Harmony. When you have a number of things, like so, all right, a number of things like so, your assumption is may harmony, di ba? Pag may harmony, kasi nasa domain eh. Sabihin, they all belong to a single domain. So if they all belong to a single domain, then there must be something that puts them together, yes? And therefore, there is something that puts them together. There is some kind of harmony, yes? Alright, tanggalin nga natin yan. Alright, so there is some kind of harmony. There is something that is common to all of them. Alright, they are all connected to one another. That's what we mean by some harmony. And what's the connection? That means they all have the same thing tying them up together. So, ano ibig sabihin yan? When you have a system, that means you have a domain and there are connections. All right? All of them are connected. You connect all of them to one another. And the connection means there is some common thing that connects them. All right? Ulitin nga natin. So, ulitin natin, merong connection. All right? Merong connection. And there is something that connects them. All right? Between all of the members of the domain. When you simply have a bunch of numbers, it's just a bunch. Does not mean there is a system. When you say you have a system, that means may connection, di ba? Yan. Pagka may connection, ano ibig sabihin? Pag may connection, halimbawa, let's take 3 things together. All right, let's take 3 things together. Supposing you have one thing, all right. Supposing you have one thing, and another thing, and another thing. And let us say they are all connected. If they are all connected, then what do you see? You see some kind of a pattern. All right? You see some kind of a pattern. Yes? When you are able to connect, there is a pattern. Remember, we connected one day, the sun is risen from the east, and another day, the sun is risen from the east, and another day, yes, you remember that? And so many days, when we connect them all to one another, we end up with a pattern, and we express the pattern in some kind of a rule. Yes? And what's the rule? Whenever the sun rises, it rises from the east. And because of that rule, we're able to say, if tomorrow the sun will rise from the east. There you go. All right? When you have a system, that means what? That means you have some kind of a pattern. Pattern of how your things in your domain relate to one another. All right? That's what's going on. When you have just a bunch, the most that you can say is there is just a bunch or a pile. All right? A pile does not necessarily mean you have a system. Because with a pile, besides being able to say there's a pile, you don't see any pattern. All right? That's the key word, pattern. But to have any pattern is to have what? Is to have some kind of a connection. All right? Ay, mali. Sorry. To have a pattern is to have some kind of a connection. That's what we're saying. Like this connection here. All right? It's 1, 2, 3. And so you have a pattern, we say triangle. All right? So once you have your connections, then you can see the pattern. All right? No connection, no pattern. No pattern, no connection. Alright? So, the moment you have a pattern or many, many patterns, then you get to have a system. Alright? Now, back to our definition. Alright? Yan. Yung gusto natin makita, ano ba yung pattern na pinag-uusapan? Kaya may system. Alright? Now, tanong, Sir, di ba ang pinag-uusapan natin logic at saka knowledge? You remember? Balik tayo sa Greece. Ang usapan natin, philosophy. Love of wisdom. Nauso dito. Pangit yan. Ito na lang. Nauso dito. Alright? Sa very fertile grounds for intellectuals overlap between the old world of Persia and the old world of Egypt. And anong nauso? Love of wisdom. Anong kinalaman yan? Anong kinalaman ng language sa pinag-uusapan natin? You see, ang pinag-uusapan natin is about wisdom or knowledge. Wisdom or knowledge. Yung kasing mga Greeks, when they think of the things in their minds, they think of these thoughts like the thought that whenever the sun rises, it rises from the east. The thought that for all free falling bodies, F equals ma. The thought that parallel lines do not intersect. All those things. In our minds, guess what? For the Greeks, given their unique reflective method, or their unique method of reflection, all those thoughts are expressed in some linguistic form. The reason why we have the question kanina sa Mentimeter. Alright? You know as an infant when to cry and when not to cry. That's good. You know as an infant when you are hungry or not. And you cry when you're hungry. That's good. Those are forms of knowledge that are genetic in form. Even if you have yet to learn your first term, your first word, your linguistic expressions, you already know something when you are born. Those forms of knowledge are what we might call genetic forms of knowledge. All right? Guess what? When you are born as an infant, you do not know what the taste of pineapple is, yes? You do not know that a square plus b square is equal to c square. There are many things you do not know when you are born as an infant. As you grow up, you begin to have many of these kinds of knowledge like for all free-falling bodies, F equals ma. These forms of knowledge are expressed in linguistic form. Expressed in sentences like, for all free-falling bodies, F equals ma. All right? Whenever the sun rises, it rises from the east. These are all linguistic expressions. Most, but not all. Most, but not all of your knowledge that you bear in your minds are expressed in linguistic form. That's what we're talking about. All right, let's get back to this. Ang dami sumagot. A bunch of numbers is simply a compilation of the said numbers. On the other hand, a system of numbers shows some sort of idea or thought. Well, yes, that's one. Ayan, sabi ni Mr. Joshua Reyes, organized. That's right, organized, coming from the word organization, coming from the word organism. And what's an organism? Is composed of many things, like your brains and your stomach and your muscles, which are composed of organs, composed of tissues, composed of cells, composed of organelles, composed of, and so many things, all right? Put them together, you have a system. Yes, that's right, Mr. Joshua Reyes. Organized, all right? When you say a bunch of numbers po, it is simply just the numbers doesn't have any value, no connection. Ang galing ni Mr. Guzman, di ba? Connection nga, pinag-uusapan natin kanina. A bunch of numbers is nonsense. A system of numbers can mean something. Meaning, yes, Mr. Escusa, meaning, and meaning comes from some organization, and we will deal with that later. Very good. System of numbers means the elements are interdependent with one another. Exacto. Interdependent connection. All right? Harmony. Yan. Hindi ko na pala kailangan magturo. Anak ng tinapay. Mag-tsaa na lang tayo. Alam nyo na pala eh. Alright, let's get back to this. So, we are dealing with knowledge. Alright? And knowledge comes in the form of linguistic expressions for most of what we know. We will go beyond linguistic expressions later, pero saka na ha? Dito muna tayo sa language. So, napulot natin yan from the Greeks. Very unique ang kanilang ano nga bang tawag doon? Reflective method of reflection. Very unique. And they were the first at that time, and even now, we still insist so much to say that what we know are in linguistic form. All right? So, that's the reason now why our interest in language. So, language is a system of units. And let's get back to this. What are the units of a language? The units of a language are called terms. All right? Language is a system of terms. Ano nga yun? Terms. T-E-R-M-S. All right? Terms. Yan. All right? The units of a language are called terms. There are many kinds of terms because there are many kinds of languages. Some terms are called words. With natural languages, we call the units of a language words. All right? So far, so good. Pakita ko sa inyo. Nakalimutan ko eh. Yan. Can you see it? Yeah, and the units of a language are called terms. And there are many kinds of languages. You have natural languages. And with natural languages, the units are called words. Some languages are technical, like computer languages. All right, with computer languages, what are the units called? All right, computer languages. What are the units called? All right, some of you probably know this. They are called bytes. Yan. Some languages are common to you, but you don't usually recognize them as languages. They are we're talking about the language of science, all right? Like, what's the language of science? Of course you know it. All right, mathematics. If you treat mathematics as a language, then what do you have? If you treat mathematics as a language, the units of your language are called terms, and terms are more often than not your numbers, yes? Your numbers. So you have there three kinds of languages: natural, computer languages, some technical language, mathematics as a language, and for each one of them, you have different kinds of terms. All right, we will deal with other languages later. All right, generic expression for all the units of a language are called terms. And all right, and sino nga ba yung nagbanggit ng meaning? Yan, si Mr. Escusa. Mr. Escusa, when we discuss terms, later we will deal with meanings. Pero later na lang ha. Saka na muna. Alright, tama ka dyan, Mr. Escusa. We have to deal with meanings. So, ano nga uli yung ating definition ng language? A language is a system of units. All right, is a system of units, a system that is presumed to be harmonious or with some kind of coherence, a system of what terms? And let's go on, realizable in some sensory medium. Ayan. Kaya sabi natin, gusto natin technical definition eh. Realizable in some sensory medium. The commonsensical definition of a language usually points out written or spoken expressions. Hindi naman mali, kulang. Alright? Bakit? We have 5 senses. When you say written, something that you see. When you say spoken, something that you hear. But actually, as I've already pointed out, you can have another way of expressing your thoughts. How? With the Braille system. Remember? Braille. Hanapin nga natin yung Braille. Alright? Braille system. Alright, there you go. Ang ginagamit sa Braille system, ano? Ayan. Feeling of touch. Alright? Alright? Universally accepted system of writing used by hand for blind persons. Alright? Blind persons cannot see. They can hear. But when they read, they do not read in terms of writing. They read in terms of feeling what for us would be seen. Alright? So, kulang. Pag sinabi nating written or spoken, dalawang medium lang, sensory medium. Gusto natin 5. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Pwede naman na you can express yourself not with things that you can see, not with things that you can hear. Pwede you can express yourself with things you can feel. But also, you can express with things that what? You can taste. Remember, pagka February 14, at you want to express yourselves, what do? You give someone something sweet, di ba? Bigyan mo ng something sweet. Ayan. Yan ang ekspresyon ko ng pagmamahala nating dalawa. Or sometimes, you don't want to express something that is sweet, magbigay ka ng something na pagkaasim-asim at pagkapait-pait at pagkaanghang-anghang. Yan ang ating pagsasama. Bahala ka sa buhay mo. Yan. What am I saying? We express ourselves also every once in a while with our sense of taste. And similarly with our sense of smell. Kaya nga may entire industry based on smell, di ba? So, once in a while, you express yourselves in terms of your perfume or your cologne, all right? And pag minsan, sasamahan nyo pa, if you're not satisfied with the smell, sasamahan nyo pa yan ng pheromones. Sikreto. Saka na natin pag-usapan. All right, so, technical language means realizable in some sensory medium, any of the 5 senses. Hindi natin sinililimit sa sense of seeing and sense of hearing. Kasama yung sense of seeing, sense of hearing, sense of smelling, sense of touch, sense of taste. Alright? Lahat yan kasama. 5 senses. Now, notice, if you say realizable in some sensory medium, given any of our 5 sensory media, we are also saying if you can sense, by definition, that means you can observe. Remember? When you say you sense, that means you say you can observe. Yes? By definition, to say sense is to say observe. That's what we want to focus on. Observe. And guess what? What do we observe? We observe objects, yes, like tables and chairs and computers and cell phones. And what are these objects? These are physical material objects. Yan. Physical material objects. Alright? Anong importante dyan? Physical material objects. Ganare po. Supposing zero sensory medium ka. You cannot hear, you cannot smell, you cannot taste, you cannot hear, you cannot feel. What happens? Zero. Zilch. If you have none of these senses, what happens? Mahirap ma-imagine, ano? Supposing may bomba na tumama sa'yo, alright? And it explodes. Kaboom. And you're a soldier. Ikaw yung sundalo, tinamaan ng bomba. And then you wake up one morning, you're on a bed, on a hospital. You cannot see because you're blinded. You cannot hear anything because of the shock waves of the bomb. All right? Because of the shock waves of the bomb, you lose all your limbs. From your thighs down, both of your legs. From your shoulders down, both of your arms. And then you have your sense of smell. But then you don't have any sense of taste. Why? Because you cannot speak. Why? You cannot taste. Why? Because things have become so complicated that at the hospital, they remove your jaw together with your tongue. But you're still alive. You are still alive. So here you are, the heroic soldier, still alive on a bed with no limbs. Cannot hear, cannot see, but can smell, cannot speak. And then what? How do you feel? Na-imagine nyo ba yung sundalong ganyan? Tinamaan ka ng bomba, kamalas mo. No? Para kang uod, gagapang-gapang dun sa iyong bed. Guess what? There was in fact a novel about that kind of soldier because during World War I, there was in fact, probably more than one, but they have at least one individual who had that kind of problem. Somewhere in Austria. Alright, but saka na natin pag-usapan yung Austria. But ano yung pinag-uusapan natin? Well, guess what? There is this fellow. Let me try to find. Alright, sandali ha. Hanapin natin. Merong sine alam ko na. When you have time, alright? When you have time, watch this movie. This movie is an award-winning movie at the Cant Film Festival. But it's based on a novel. I don't know why this novel has not won any award, but it's a very moving movie. The title of the movie is Johnny Got His Gun. All right, you go watch this when you have time. If you are into anti-war movements, this is the kind of movie you should see. All right, yan. Pinost ko ha. Kung may time kayo, panoodin yan. Magandang sine yan. It's about such a soldier na tinamaan ng bala ng kanyon. Kawawa naman. And guess what? This soldier cannot smell. Can smell, cannot see, cannot hear, cannot say anything, cannot feel with his hands, and does not have any limbs from the shoulders down, from the hips down, still alive, unfortunately like a worm squirming on his bed. So you wake up out of your comatose. When you wake up, you don't see anything, you don't hear anything, what will you do? You'll feel like a what? Like you're in hell. You wake up, you don't know where you are. Everything is so quiet, it's so dark, you don't hear anything. Maybe I'm in hell. Or maybe not. And it takes him what? Several days to conclude, I'm not yet dead. I'm somewhere, I'm not in hell. It takes him several days to find out. And then finally he concludes, I think I'm in a hospital. And then concluding he is in a hospital, then he has a problem. How do I know I'm awake or I'm asleep? I'm awake or I'm asleep, how do I know? And then it takes him days to develop a system by which he can say, I'm today awake. I'm today asleep. And so on and so forth. I'm not dreaming. These are real things happening. Now, this is the point. Supposing you're that soldier, and you now want to tell everybody, can you please, you kill horses, don't you? When horses break their legs. It's so difficult in my situation. Can you please help me die? Get me out of this misery? How do you tell anyone that? Or conversely, supposing you now feel that the hospital administrators are not giving you any water anymore, are not giving you any food anymore, and in fact, you feel that they want you to die, and still you say, well, for whatever it's worth, I don't want to die, I want to live. Alright? You want to tell everyone, putahin na ninyo, ayoko pang mamatay. Huwag niyo akong pababayaang mamatay. How do you communicate with anyone? Get the point? Supposing you're that soldier, you have no physical or material way of communicating to anyone how you feel. Alright? Pabayaan nyo na akong mamatay. This is worse than hell. Or, wag nyo akong pababayaang mamatay. How do you communicate with anyone? Without any material or physical medium with which you can communicate to anyone. Guess what? That soldier, at least in that film, in that novel written in 1938, that's a novel written in 1938. The soldier wanted to die, and he wanted to communicate to everyone he wanted to die. Then later, he wanted to live. But the point is, he was able to tell everyone what he wanted. How? Bahala kayo sa buhay niyo. Secret. Panoorin ninyo. Now, what's the message here? The message is, alright, manood kayo ng sine na yan. When we communicate with language, we need our sensory capacity. Our capacity to smell, our capacity to see, our capacity to hear, our capacity to sense, to sense touch, our capacity to taste. But then that means if we can sense, that means we can observe. That means we can observe objects which are themselves physical or material. What are we saying? Language requires physical, material medium or media. All right? Physical, material, medium, or media. So, going back to our question, will love exist? Will love exist without physical, material, medium? The best answer that we got kanina is at least you can feel, you can express through feelings, but excuse me, when you feel, you need what? You need the physical, material form of what you call your nerve endings. No nerve endings, no feelings. All right? No nerve endings, no feelings. No heart, no feelings. No brain, no feelings. All right? All right? Balik tayo dito ha. Nakalimutan ko na naman eh. Ito nga ang sinasabi natin. All right? Ang sinasabi natin, for you to have a language, that means you can sense. That means you can observe. That means you observe objects that are physical, material in nature. All right? You can have physical. Ulitin natin. just to be sure. That when you have a language, that means you can send. That means you can observe objects. That means you can observe objects that are physical, material in nature. All right? You need something physical or material thing or medium with which you can communicate. All right? You lose your words, you lose your physical medium of your art, you lose your books, you lose the memory of your computers, you lose everything that is material. There is nothing you can talk about in terms of knowledge, right? There's no linguistic expression that you can communicate with. Love will not exist. You cannot think about it without your brain. You cannot feel something about it without your nerve endings. But then with your nerve endings, you have to have some kind of medium with which you can feel with your nerve endings. Even with your heart, you have to have your heart that is material in form. That's what we're talking about. We'll deal with that later. Let's get back to our definition. All right. Language is a system of terms that are physical, material in form. That's what we're saying. Guess what? If they are physical, material in form, they are what? They are tools that you can use. All right? They are tools that you can use. Tools. All right? They are tools that you can use. Eksakto. All right? Balik tayo dun sa mga comments ninyo ha. Tingnan ko lang. It will not exist without physical means. Yes. Whether it is a language or a system of numbers, without physical means, there's no way of dealing with them. All right? Your language is a system of tools that you use. And you're able to use them because they are physical, material in nature. All right? Hindi yan magic. Bengarium Leviosa. Hindi yan magic. There's no magic in it. Alright? Sa sili lang yun. Tsaka sa Harry Potter. Alright? So, language is a system of units realizable in some sensory medium, meaning to say, physical, material medium that you use as tools. Now, punta tayo din eh. Only certain combinations of which have meaning. Only certain combinations of which have meaning by convention. Oh, meaning by convention, ha? Sabi nga ni Mr. Escusa kanina, meaning. Mr. Escusa, sikat ka na. Salamat kay Mr. Escusa na banggit natin, meaning. Alright. Alright. Ano naman to? Sandali ha. Kakainis eh. Gusto kong i-erase eh. Ha? Huwag na lang natin i-erase. Gawa tayong bago. Kakainis ko. Alright. Ganito. Ano nga ang sabi natin? We're talking of connections. Yes? We're talking of connections. One way or the other, we want to connect something to another thing. All right, so connect. All right. When you have a term, you connect it to some meaning, yes? When you have a term, there is some kind of a connection to some kind of meaning. You already know that. As adults or young adults, you know that. All right? Question. How can you describe the relationship between a term and its meaning? All right? Ano ba yung connection na yan? Now, ito yung Isang halimbawa natin. Alright? When you have a triangle, alright, you know that some interior angle of a triangle, when it changes, some exterior angle of that triangle will also change in dimension. Yes? Pag ito nagbago, ito magbabago rin. Tama? At pag ito nagbago, then not what are we saying? Ito magbabago rin. Tama? So, ang sinasabi natin, itong angulo na ito, 1, ay connected sa angulo na ito, 2, which is connected sa angulo na ito, 3, in some functional manner, yes? Some kind of a function. Alright? Functional relationship. That's what we're saying. What's the relationship? Functional. Alright? Or, if you like, what's the relationship? Mathematical. Alright? Mathematical. Question. Is this relationship between a term and its meaning functional or mathematical? Halimbawa, sa English, we say a table. The term table relates to a thing called a table. But in Filipino, we say mesa o hapag, kainan. Logical ba yun? Functional, mathematical, yung relationship between the term table and the object table? Well, alam ko na yung sasabihin sa ninyo. Siyempre, hindi. But let me check. Meron bang magsasabi na mathematical or functional? Wala naman. Dini. Dini sa klase natin. Meron ba nagsasabi mathematical or functional o 3 class comment? Tingnan natin. Alright. Wala naman nagsasabi na functional or mathematical. So, we go on. So, the relationship between a term and its meaning is nothing mathematical or functional. Like the relationship between the angles of any given triangle. Okay, not a problem. Now, imagine a mother and a child. Sus, Mariosep, kahirap mag-drawing na rin. Sandali Lalo na pagka ang ginagamit ko ay di ito lang aking. Ayan, okay. Anong ginagamit ko? Ang ginagamit ko lang ay yung aking mouse. Alright? Supposing you have a mother and a child. Alright? Question. What's the relationship between a mother and a child? How do you describe the relationship between a mother and a child? Well, we can say natural. Alright, natural. We can say biological. Alright, natural, biological. Question, is the relationship between a term and its meaning natural or biological? Hindi rin naman. Hindi. Alright? Hindi. Pardon the expression. So what is it all about? How can you describe what kind of a relationship is the relationship between a term and its meaning? How can you describe it? All right? And this brings you to my long hair. This brings you to my long hair. All right? Nakakainis naman ito. Alright. This brings you to my long hair. Anong kinalaman ng usapan natin sa aking long hair? Alam nyo, dati yung buho ko hanggang dito. Tapos may tali ako dito. Tapos may blaklak ako dito. Ang favorite expression ko ito, peace, man. Tapos meron akong pendant. Ditong malaki. Malaking malaki. Yung pantalong ko, malapad na sinturon. Anong tawag sa amin? Alright. Let's get back to Jose Rizal. Age of Inventors. Nung panahon ni Jose Rizal, may mga sikat na artist. Sino yung sikat na artist? Yan example, si Vincent van Gogh. Sino pa? Si kaibigan niya, si Paul Gauguin. Yang mga artist na yan, hanapin natin. Yang mga artist na yan, alright, ay walang pera. Si Vincent van Gogh, walang kapera-pera yan eh. Alright? Now, kawawa naman, di ba? He lived from 1853 to 1890. Alright? Matanda ng a little over 10 years kayo si Rizal. Anong punto? Si Van Gogh and his friend, they had that much money kasi nobody wanted to buy their paintings. Merong isang babae na mayaman, contemporary nila, ay by the way, kalimutan ko na naman. Ito si Vincent van Gogh. Yan. Alright. Can you see it? Okay. Can you see that? Now, si Vincent van Gogh ay walang pera. At saka si kaibigan niya, si Paul Gauguin, nobody wanted to buy their paintings. Nagkataon na may babae na mayaman. Siya ay baroness ng, ang pangalan ay Bohemia. It's a big region somewhere in northeastern Europe. Malapit sa northern Greece. Yung Bohemia, mayamang-mayamang bayan, mayamang-yamang region, hindi lang isang bayan, at yung babae na baroness, siya may-ari niyan. Sabi niya, kawawa naman kayo, punta kayo rito sa Bohemia. Lahat kayong mga artist na walang pera, dito kayo tumira kasi I love the arts. And I'll give you stipend and a place to stay, and I'll buy all the goods, the things that you need for you to be able to do your art. Di yung maraming mga artists, kagaya nila Vincent van Gogh, Paul Gauguin, and so on and so forth, nagpuntahan doon. Pagdating naman ng mga artist doon, nako, ang itsura. Kung kayo ay napapasyal sa College of Fine Arts, makikita nyo doon, ibang klase ang mga artist. Yung ibang mga artist, ang itsura, may tusok-tusok kung saan-saan sa mukha, o kaya sa tenga, o kaya kung ano-anong tato, di ba? Ang buhok parang pag pinatakan ng butiki, mamamatay yung butiki, something like that. Well, yung mga artist na ibang ugali, very esoteric ang ugali, you might say, very, ano bang tawag doon? Hindi naman esoteric very different. Alright? So, ano nangyari? Dumating ang panahon sa dami ng mga artist sa Bohemia. Alright? Ano ba yung Bohemia? Alright? Sa dami ng mga artist sa Bohemia. Alright? German, Western, West pala. Westernmost ng Czech Republic. Alright? But anyway, there you go, Bohemia. Ito, Bohemia. Now, what's the point? Yung Bohemia, dumami ang mga artist. Yung mga artist, ibang itsura, ibang klase. So, anong nangyari? The term Bohemian came to have a meaning. To mean a socially unconventional person. Parang mga artist, kagaya nino. Sabi ko nga, ni Vincent van Gogh, sabi ko nga, ni Paul Gauguin, ibang ugali. So ano nangyari? Pag ibang ugali mo, anywhere in Europe, even among Englishmen, ang tawag sa'yo, wow, man, napaka-bohemian mo naman. So that name stuck. That name stuck to people with a very unconventional behavior. Later on, another generation nung panahon ng World War I. Sino ang sikat nung panahon ng World War I? Well, let me give you one. Si Sino nga yung author nung ano? Author nung The Great Gatsby? What's his name? Alright. Yung author ng Great Gatsby, sino? Si F. Scott Fitzgerald. Alright? Si F. Scott Fitzgerald, yan yung generation niya. Alright? He lived from 1896, next generation na, di ba? To 1940. Sino yung kanyang contemporary? Si Ernest, sino sikat? Ernest Hemingway. Yan. Alright? Yung generation ni Ernest Hemingway at generation ni F. Scott Fitzgerald, yung mga yan, mga sikat na intellectual, tambay saan? Sa Paris, sa France. Sa Paris, sa France, maganda ang music. Bakit? Kasi merong jazz music. Bakit nagkaroon ng jazz music? Di ba ang jazz music unang nauso sa Americas? Kasi po, sa Amerika, nung nauso ang jazz music, yung mga American blacks, African Americans, sila ay nagpauso ng jazz music. Yung mga puti, ng mga bigots, pinapatay yung mga jazz musician. Sabi nila, ay, itong mga lintris na mga black na ito, mga devils, yung kanilang mga tugtog, the music of the devils. So, yung mga magagaling na jazz musician, doon tambay saan? Sa Paris, France. Doon sa Paris, France, yung mga music scene, ang ganda, sikat sa buong mundo. At dyan nagtatambayan yung mga intellectuals kagaya nina F. Scott Fitzgerald, nina Ernest Hemingway, mga binatilyo naman panahon na yan. And merong mga mahilig sa music, mahilig sa beat, mahilig sa, alright, balik kayo sa akin. Mahilig sa music, mahilig sa rhythm, is the rhythm, man, is the music, man. Yeah, man. Alright, yung mga mahilig sa music na yan, long hair, at may goatee. At dahil nasa Paris, France, naka-beret. At dahil mahilig sa music, laging may dalang gitara, or may dalang bongo, or ibang itsura. Naka-chaleco, naka-dungarees, walang sapatos, naka-sandals. Ang tawag sa kanila ay mga beatniks. Yan ang tawag sa kanila. Beatniks. Alright? Prevalent throughout the late 40s and the mid-50s dahil nga doon sa generation ng mahilig sa music noong panahon ni na Ernest Hemingway at saka F. Scott Fitzgerald, nauso yung pagiging beatnik. Ayan ang itsura ng mga beatnik. Alright? Yung mga beatniks ay unconventional ang ugali. So, yung dating kilalang, excuse me, nawala na naman yung aking stream. Alright, can you see the stream? Beatniks. Alright, ito itsura ng mga beatniks. Yan yung sumunod na generation. Actually, may mali dito konting mali dito sa sinasabi about the beatniks. Yung mga beatniks, pre-war pa may beatniks na ang itsura nila naka-beret at saka yan, naka-glasses. Alam nyo ba kaya naka-shades ang mga beatniks? Kasi sa France, uso yung hashish. Pagka hindi maganda ang tama sa pag-iinom ng liquor, they smoke pot, marijuana, and hashish. And when you smoke pot and hashish, yung mata mo mapulang-mapula, kaya they wear the shades. Ang gusto kong sabihin, yung unang unconventional na itsura ng mga tao, ang tawag nila bohemian, nung late 1800s, late 19th century, pagdating ng pre-war and post-war, ang tawag na sa kanila mga beatniks. Alright? What's the term? Beatniks. Alright? What's the term? Beatniks. Alright? Anyway, teka, gawa tayo ng, hanap tayo ng, alright, beatnik. Yan. Ito yung mga image ng mga beatniks. Alright? Ito, typical beatnik. Ito yung image ng mga beatnik. So, yung dating bohemian, naging beatnik. Ayan. Okay? May bongo, mahilig sa music. Kaya beatnik kasi it's the beat, man. It's the beat. Now, pagdating nung panahon ko, kami ay anti-war. Tapos galit kami sa environmental degradation. Yung generation ko, ayaw namin ng nuclear war. Ayaw namin ng environmental degradation. Pinauso namin ng Earth Day. Kami ay back to nature, kaya may bulaklak kami sa mga buhok. Meron kaming headband, long hair kami. Ayaw namin ng militaristic outlook. Gusto namin long hair, ayaw namin maging military ang tingin sa amin. Alright? Ang aming pantalon parang pangwalis ng karsada. Ang tawag, bell bottoms. Alright? Ang hilig namin, peace, man. Dahil iba nga rin ang itsura namin, yung sumunod na generation, sunod sa beatnik, ang tawag na sa amin, hippie. And then yung mga hippie, later, uminit ang ulo. Nung uminit ang ulo, nagtusok-tusok na kung saan sa mukha, tapos ang kanilang mga kamay ay meron ng itim na nail polish, tapos kung ano-ano ng tato, tapos pagka nagka-concert, binabasag na kung ano-ano yung kanilang mga gitara, ang tawag na sa kanila mga punk. Later yung mga punk, later naging iba na itsura, parang may short pants na akala mo malalaglag sa karsada. Tapos meron silang mahabang chain, parang yung tali ng aso sa bahay, kinuha, nilagay sa shorts. Tapos, ano ba mga itsura? Tapos ganito, laging gaganyan-ganyan itsura. Who let the dogs out? All right? Anong tawag ninyo? Ang tawag ninyo ay from, ang tawag ay bohemian, naging beatnik, naging hippie, naging punk, naging hip-hop. Eh ngayon yata hindi na hip-hop ang tawag. Ang tawag nyo na ay parang jumping jologs. Pag may concert dito sa UP, nandun sa labas nung concert place, na kasi merong bakod eh. May bakod na mataas, walang pera. Yung mga jumping jologs, parang Mexican jumping beans, tatalon-talon dun sa labas, nanonood. Para makita yung nagko-concert dun sa loob. Ang tawag natin, jumping jologs. And life goes on. What am I saying? Balik tayo sa ating sharing, ha? What am I sharing? When you have a term, all right? When you have a term, meron niyang pagbabago eh. Nagbabago depende sa time, all right? Depende sa generation, all right? Nagbabago, in other words, ang context. Iba ang context nung panahon ni na Vincent van Gogh. Iba ang background ng history nung panahon ni na Ernest Hemingway. Iba ang panahon nung panahon nino namin, ibang panahon noong 1980s and 1990s, ibang panahon ng Gen X, Gen Y, at kung ano-ano pa. At yung pagbabago na yan, ang sinasabi nga natin, conventional. Nagbabago ang convention. That's what we're saying. Terms across time, from T's of N to T's of 0, T's of 0 to T's of N, nagbabago across time, nagbabago yung convention. Alright, it's a matter of agreement. What can be useful or not? That's what we're saying. When you have a term and it's related to a meaning, the relationship between a term and its meaning is a matter of convention. So yung dating bohemian, alright, yung dating bohemian naging beatnik. Yung dating beatnik naging hippie. Yung dating hippie naging hip-hop, then naging jumping jologs, punk, jumping jologs. If you live among the Inuits, ano yung Inuits? Yung mga nasa mga Eskimo. Alright? They have more than 200 ways of calling ice, ice. Sa Pilipinas, we only have what? 2 ways of calling ice. Bakit? Magkaiba tayo ng context. Among the Inuits, the Eskimos, you need to have many ways of calling ice, ice. Why? Because it has to do with their survival. Sa Pilipinas, walang masyadong kinalaman sa survival natin ng ice. So, dalawa lang ang tawag natin, ice at saka, well, yellow. Or, well, tatlo pala, no? Nieve. Nieve. But the point is, we have limited ways of calling ice ice. Which goes to say what? Well, which goes to say, it's a matter of usage. It's a matter of convention. How we use. How useful the terms are. All right? It's a matter of convention. And guess what? Conventional in the sense that by accident. Bakit? Kasi pinanganak silang Eskimo, pinanganak kayong Pilipino, nakapili ba kayo? Hindi naman. Whim of nature. It's a whim of nature that some people are Inuits and some people are Pinoys. Some people are Chino, some people are Pinoys. Accident of nature. So, on one hand, the relationship between a term and its meaning is a matter of accident. All right? On the other hand, it's a matter of agreement. All right? Aksidente na nagkaroon ng Eskimo doon sa mga places na maraming ice. Aksidente na nagkaroon ng maraming Pilipino sa places na maraming bigas at palay. You know, we have more than 2,000 ways of calling rice, rice. So, balik tayo sa ating definition. Alright? Language is a system of units realizable in some sensory medium, only certain combinations of which have meaning by convention. Alright? Linguistic expressions are tools. Tools that by convention get to have use among members of a community. And it's just a matter of agreement among the members depending on the time, the historical, economic, cultural context, di ba? Nung sabi ko nga kanina, cultural context, mahilig sila sa music, kaya mga beatniks mahilig lagi sa beat and rhythm, lagi may dalang instruments ng music and so on and so forth, mga artists. Only certain combinations of which have meaning by convention and hence useful for communication. Ito yung last part, useful for communication. Presumption ko, lahat kayo tao. Bakit? Kasi pag sinabi natin communication, as you will see later, but I will show you how later, ang inyong capacity to wield language is genetic. It's genetic in nature to the point that whether you like it or not, whether somebody teaches you or not, you will have a language. And when you get to have a language that is, like I said, the product of your genetic inheritance, you cannot but avoid to be able to communicate. So I will just assume that for everybody, communication is very natural. All right? Communication is very natural. That's the primary function of a language. Now, dagdagan natin. Anong dagdag natin? The primary function of a language is, all right? What's the primary function? All right, the primary function is communication. Primary. All right, primary function. Communication. All right? Alam nyo na yan, natural sa inyo yan, hindi ko napapaliwanag. However, let me call attention to what we might call secondary functions of a language. Ano yan? There are 3 of them. They are also important functions of a language, but they are not as important as the primary. Nevertheless, they are still important. Let me repeat. Nevertheless, they are still important, although not as important as the primary language. Kaya we call them secondary. Ano yung primary language number 1? Primary function ng language number 1. Put it this way. Alright? When you use a language, you use it for what? Alright? Well, okay. You use a language to communicate, very good. Now, ganito. Unang tanong. Yung tatay nyo ba, ay sigurado kayo tatay nyo? Yung nanay ninyo, nanay ninyo ba? How sure are you that your parents are really your own parents? Sasabihin nyo, well, kamukha ko eh. Ako kamukha ko si Dolphy, therefore anak ako ni Dolphy. Hindi naman. Well, sir, may birth certificate ako. Ito, oh, birth certificate ko. Question, paano kung kamag-anak ng mga director ng PhilHealth yung gumawa ng certificate nyo, mahilig sa fake. Fake na mga dokumento. Alright? How do you know you're the sons and daughters of your parents? Guess what? You know you're the sons and daughters of your parents not because of your first-hand information. Hindi naman kayo nakita nyo, binunot kayo sa nanay nyo, ay ako yun. Hindi naman yung ganun eh. Alright? How do you know your sons and daughters of your parents? You get it from other people. Who may have gotten it from other people. How do you know the world is round? Nakalabas na ba kayo ng Earth? How do you know the world is round? You know the world is round. Yes? You know Magellan discovered the Philippines. Yes? What's the point? One secondary function of language is what? Transfer. Alright? Transfer and accumulation of knowledge. Dahil meron kang language, nakaka-transfer ka efficiently ng language, nakaka-accumulate ka ng language. Bakit? Halimbawa, compare natin sa genetic inheritance. Ang inyong alleles at chromosomes, ang inyong alleles at chromosomes ay can only contain the equivalent of 10,000 words. That's the most. 10,000 words. That's it. Ang English language, meron niyang 1.5 million words pag pinagsama-sama niyo yung commonsensical at technical expressions. Mas marami, di ba? In fact, the more a language can carry, the more civilization you can have. Limited lang ang genetic inheritance. The equivalent, yung inyong alleles, yung inyong chromosomes, limited lang sa 10,000 characters. Alright? So, mas efficient na transfer and recording of knowledge yung ating linguistic expressions. Alright? That's one. What's the other? Alright, what's the other secondary function of language? One, transfer, accumulation of knowledge. Alright. Take note. When you go join the university, may exam. UPCAT. You remember your UPCAT? Yes. Guess what? Part of the exam sa UPCAT ay word meanings. Remember? Word meanings. Tama ba? Bakit? Kasi alam natin with empirical analysis, empirical data, the more words that you have, the higher IQ that you have. Alam natin yan. Alam niyo yan. Alright? Yung reading comprehension ninyo, dahil marami kayong words na alam, mas marami kayong nako-comprehend. More words, higher IQ. More words, more understanding. Alright? Ano gusto nating sabihin? Para sa isang martial artist, pag tumingin siya sa dalawang nagtataekwondo, marami siyang nakikita. Nakikita niya, wow, ang galing naman ng turning side nito, ang bilis. Wow, ang kanyang axe kick, tamang-tama ang timing. Wow, etong isa, ang bulok, puro 45 lang, 45, 45. You have terms with which you can identify the moves. Pero for someone like your girlfriend, by the way, the best way of having a date for you, boys, tip, dalhin nyo sa isang UFC tournament, bloody. Yeah! Kunyari, dala mo yung girlfriend mo doon, UFC tournament, ano makikita niya? Ay, are magaling. Ay, are bulok. Bakit? Ay, are nanalo. Are natalo. Ay, bakit nga natalo? Ay, kasi nga bulok. Ay, bakit bulok? Ay, kasi natalo. Eh bakit nga natalo? Eh kasi ari magaling. Eh bakit nga magaling? Eh suntukan na lang kayo. When someone does not have the terms with which he can identify the moves, he does not see so much of the game. Alright? He does not see so much of the beauty of the competition. And that's one advantage of a language. Alright? A language facilitates perception. Facilitates, yes, perception. The more expressions you have, the more you can see. Kagaya nga ng example ko sa isang tournament ng martial arts. But in relation to what you can see, you can also have more ways of thinking. It facilitates your thinking. Because the more you can see, the more you can think about. Remember our expression earlier? Anong sabi natin? When we look at our worlds outside our minds, what do we realize? There is some kind of a reflection, yes? There is some kind of a reflection. You have your house and you call it house. All right, you have a tree and then you call it a tree. You have a carabao, your pet carabao, and you call it a carabao, yes? And you have your mountains and you have your rice fields and your clouds, all right, and the birds and the bees. And what are we saying? The more you have a language, the more you can see, yes? The more you have a language, the more you can see. But similarly, because you can see, there is something to reflect upon as you see them. And therefore, the more you can think about them, yes? Like your pet kalabaw, all right? Ay, hindi ko pa pala siya napapakain. Dapat balikan ko, pakainin ko yung kalabaw ko. So what's the point? Not only does your language helps you perceive better perception, it helps you with your thinking. All right? The more you have a language with more terms, the better you can think, therefore the higher IQ. That's what I was saying earlier. All right? Mas mataas ang IQ ninyo. Bakit? Mas madaling mag-isip pagka maraming terms. Bakit? Kasi mas marami kayong nakita dahil marami kayong terms. Alright? And therefore, marami kayong nakita, marami kayong naisip, marami kayong na-accumulate, natatransfer. Dahil na-accumulate mo, na itatransfer mo. Alright? So there you are. What are the three secondary functions of a language? One, transfer and accumulation of knowledge. Transfer and accumulation of knowledge. All right. Two, perception. You can perceive without language, but it what? Enhances your perception. Enhances your perception. All right? Three, na-enhance ang perception mo, therefore it enhances your thinking. There you go. There you go. The three secondary functions of a language. So finally, we can now say, language is a system of units realizable in some sensory medium, only certain combinations of which have meaning by convention and hence useful for communication. I'm so sorry na sobrahan na naman tayo ng daldal ko. Any comments later, I'll look into them. Magandang umaga po. See your other classes. Pasensya na po. End of broadcast.